Hi, good morning, afternoon, evening. My name is Vanessa, and today I'm here to talk with you about queer theory and its difficult relationships with queer studies. My purpose in speaking with you today is to raise awareness of issues affecting queer identifying people. I, a college student, believe all ages can benefit from these discussions. Though I try my best to create inclusive, welcoming environments for all groups of people, I think many of us are lacking in terms of understanding queer theory and the groups often included under the queer umbrella. Personally, prior to taking a queer studies class, I had never considered the influence of queer theory on intersex people. I hope that by sharing my key takeaways from this course, I can inspire my peers to gain a better understanding of what people exist outside of established gender and sexuality norms experiences. On the surface, queer theory seeks to challenge conventional standards of sexuality, gender, and identity. Queer theory asks us to evaluate our understanding of traditional social and political structures, such as marriage as strictly between males and females, and consider why we hold these notions and how such concepts become ingrained in society. Despite these noble intentions, however, this is only part of the queer experience. Other issues relative to race, gender identity also contribute to people's unconventional experiences or identities. As Patrick Johnson describes, the term queer itself has undergone significant changes. While initially used as a term to describe anything unusual, and groups interested in championing those whose sexualities or identities differ from the established norm have since adopted the term to describe themselves. Unfortunately, queer theorists have not successfully applied these terms very broadly. I will demonstrate this by describing three groups historically excluded from queer theory and the larger issues this encompasses. First, the concept of queer studies highlights queer theory's historic issues with racial biases. Johnson explains this concept by describing the specific way his grandmother pronounced the word queer in a thick, Black Southern dialect. These details are important, Johnson asserts, because they emphasize the multitude of identities that may intermingle with queer identities. Specifically, queer people of color often deal with unique challenges that white queer people do not. Johnson even explicitly states that queer studies is a theory for gays and lesbians of color. In this way, queer studies is similar to intersectionality, just as intersectionality emphasizes the ways in which factors like race, gender, and economic status interact to form people's identities. And overall, the purpose of queer studies is to broaden the scope of traditional queer studies, which may overemphasize only certain groups and identities which fall under the umbrella of the term queer. While queer studies have the intention to challenge traditional standards of sexuality and gender, it has become conventional to only discuss gay and lesbian experience in a way that does not acknowledge and differentiate between experiences of white gays and lesbians and experiences of gays and lesbians of color. Johnson notes that queer studies' homogenizing tendencies are ultimately a product of theories of promotion of inclusivity. While inclusion is admirable, the result has largely been the center of dominant voices and the creation of a homogeneous queer group that is not realistic. Ultimately, queer studies attempt to focus on the differences between the experiences of individuals within the group, raising awareness of the diversity within it, and exploring a racialized sexuality in a way that queer theory fails to do. Another group of people which are often excluded from queer theory is intersex community. Within this issue, Specifically, queer theory can fail to understand the experiences of sexuality and pleasure for intersex people post-surgery. Ian Moreland dives deeply into this topic to highlight how post-surgical sexual sensation and issues of desensitization fell outside the boundaries of how queer theory conceptualized pleasure. Moreland notes that post-surgical sensation can often be diminished and abnormal for intersex individuals. He quotes, "If queer theory can tell us why pleasure is valuable, then it follows that a queer disclosure of pleasure can pinpoint why diminishing of pleasure makes genital desensitization wrong. In other words, does queer theory have a way to discuss and critique how intersex individuals experience pleasure post-surgery? If not, then it goes to stand that queer theory is failing to include this group's experiences in its conceptualization of pleasure and sexuality." The larger issue being addressed by Moreland is how post-surgical assessments will often measure surgery success based upon heterosexual norms of pleasure, such as whether vaginal intercourse is possible, whether the patient goes on to enter into a heterosexual marriage, and whether sensation is abnormal or not. This in itself is problematic as it is measuring the experiences of intersex individual against a heterosexual norm. However, another important issue arises when we start to realize that by attempting to reconstruct the intersex body to fit heterosexual concepts of pleasure, a trade-off occurs between sensation and fitting the intersexual norm. In this way, queer theory may be perpetuating problematic concepts of the intersex sexual experience if heterosexual norms are being used to assess pleasure, and should instead strive to look for non-heteronormative sensation of minority to better understand the intersex experience. Finally, transgenders are another group which have been historically excluded from queer study. Susan Schuyler writes about transgender studies, calling it queer theory's evil twin, in how both may have the same origins, but transgender studies will fully disrupt the privileged family narratives that favor sexual identity labels, like gay, lesbian, bisexual, and heterosexual, just as Hal Johnson's formulation of queer studies is a reaction of how queer theory often centers certain voices. Stryker, critic of queer theory, also notes how queer remains a code word for gay or lesbian. In doing so, transgender perspectives of what norms identity and left out. Specifically, she writes that for transgender individuals, gender categories play a more central role in identity formation. However, queer theory can often be used sexual orientation and sexual identity as a markers of queer identity, leaving no space for transgender concepts of identity. Overall, this demonstrates again how queer theory is undoubtedly useful in disrupting and challenging conventional ideas of sexuality. But this is a prone to allowing certain perspectives to dominate its disclosure. The larger issue that this helps to illustrate is that on a global scale, the exclusion of certain voices from queer studies is also occurring for those who fall outside the boundaries of Western identity and how Western society frames gender and sexuality. Overall, what we see by discussing queer studies, intersex experiences, and transgender studies is that queer theory can fail to provide space for gays and lesbians of color, intersex experience of pleasure and sexuality, and transgender concepts of identity. In response, queer theory must broaden its scope to encompass this group's experiences, as scholars must also continue to challenge and critique the norms that are being established within queer theory that exclude this group. However, as a student, our job is also to expand our understanding of the diverse experiences and identities which fall under the umbrella term of queer, realizing that it is not a homogeneous group, and creating a safe space for voices to be heard. And thank you for listening, and I hope this helps you understand what queer theory is and how it can continue to develop to be more inclusive. Thank you.